Well, hello there, my gorgeous little horrorlings. Gather round, gather round. Come on in closely. Mama doesn't bite, unlike some of the creatures in tonight's scary stories. Hit the notification bell and you might just scare them away. There has always been a part of what happened to me that has left me with so many questions. The older I get, the more I think about it and the more I put pieces together. In reality, it wasn't very long ago. 8 years really isn't that long. I have always believed in something outside of our world. There was something out there that was bigger than we are. I used to stargaze and dream of going somewhere else. I was living with my parents while finishing my senior year in college. 22 years old, asleep on a weekday night during my spring break. My parents had relocated to be closer to my university and family. We moved in next door to the relatives, staying there for a few months while we purchased the house. It was early on in the night. It was very dark, and the sky by my home was beautiful and clear. I was reading a book and I heard a noise from outside. It was like a shuffling and a murmur of voices outside my window. I'm usually a fearful person, but this time I ran to my window with an excited feeling, like someone I've been waiting for had finally come. I threw open my curtains and I saw them. Two tall grey beings. One had a tablet-like device and the other was looking up into the window that used to be my room. I knew that they were looking for me. I yelled out the window and they both looked at me. The one with the tablet turned and pointed to me, even giving the other being a look like, "I told you that was the wrong house." They walked towards me. The next thing I remember was my alarm clock going off. I remember seeing the creatures and I wanted to see if there was something that would explain me maybe seeing something that wasn't there. Instead, my window was open, the screen was loose, and the glass was broken. I felt scared. Maybe it wasn't a dream. I tried to move on and kept it to myself. The next night I had an itch behind my leg that was driving me nuts. I looked and there was a red bump. Inside the wound was a hard black thing. It didn't look like a bug bite, a blackhead, or an ingrown hair. It was more like a stone or BB pellet under my skin. I spent days trying to dig this thing out, but it would move away and I could never get it. Finally, I couldn't take the itching anymore, so I took a seam ripper and took care of it myself. I got it out. It was the size of a grain of rice and black, but inside it looked like it was plasticized wire or some sort of flexible metal. I panicked and called out to my mum, and as soon as I sat it down on a paper towel, I turned away for a split second. When I turned back, it was gone. Nothing was there. I still have a scar, and I've never seen anything in dermatology that looks remotely like this thing. Even Dr. Pimple Popper would have been at a loss. It was like my body was rejecting something as it tried to burrow into my bloodstream or bones. I tried to let it go into the back of my mind. A few weeks after that incident, I was speaking to friends and they told me about my missing time. I was told that the year before, when I was 21, I went missing on Halloween night. We were out drinking and my friends lost sight of me for 3 hours. They said they looked for me and I finally just showed up. I didn't know I'd been missing. I don't remember the night, but what scares me is that I remember someone who apparently wasn't there. A faceless memory. I know I went somewhere and I know I was with someone, but then to just show up in a bar with no memory. They asked me where I'd been and I just pointed straight up to the clear night sky. I have no memory beyond this. When my friends asked me where I had been and what I had been doing for the past 3 hours, I just pointed straight up to the clear night sky. It was after that I began having intense dreams and a deep longing. I still have other instances of missing time that I can't explain, and memories with no context. I feel like I left something or someone somewhere. I have dreams that I met people who I felt were family. A blonde little boy crawling into my room crying out for me before shrinking into nothing. In one dream I was taken aboard a ship and a little girl sat next to me and told me I was her mother, that I'd never have a child on earth, but she wanted me to know that she was there. I dream of places that I've never been, and I've seen so many things in the sky that I can't explain. I feel like a nutcase. I feel like I have someone up there who wants me to remember, but I am terrified. I feel like I'm hiding the truth from myself and I have no one to turn to. I know that I'm not alone, and I just wanted to share because I've been thinking about it a lot lately. I feel like my true family is out there waiting for me. My real love, my real children, my true self. I want to know if it's more than just me feeling alone. I'm married now, but I feel so disconnected at times. Almost like, oh my God, I just want to go home. But I am home. I'm sleeping next to my husband, and yet I feel so alone. They have not come back in such a long time, and I don't dream about the babies as much anymore. But the night sky still feels more like home than where I am now. I want to share my story. I want to tell you my formative experience with the paranormal, with what most would identify as aliens, but it's not as simple as that. The first part of this story is why I decided to share it now, after so long. If this doesn't interest you, then skip ahead. I'll not be offended, but when looking at the authenticity of reports in my own research, I always try and look at the why. Why is someone reporting it? Do they stand to benefit or do they simply wish to share it? This experience terrifies me. I'd go as far as to say that I have a form of PTSD from it. I have only told 2 people in my life. One of them, my fiancé, and one a former partner. My mother also knows because she was tangentially a witness to this. I don't like talking about it. My throat gets tight and goes dry. My breathing gets more shallow. My eyes even blur, but I need to talk about it now. Why? Because things are changing. I'm sure that some of you will have noticed it. Go to your favourite streaming site and you'll probably find a new series on aliens and UFOs, maybe a new alien-themed drama series. The media is talking about them. The media has talked about them, about the Navy UFO sightings becoming declassified. There is some talk about an upcoming New York Times post about some recovered crash materials. 10 years ago, I would tell you that disclosure will never happen, but I also couldn't imagine half of 2020 happening. Now, it almost seems like we are being desensitized and accustomed to the thought of aliens and UFOs. Does this mean disclosure is near? Does it mean we will have an official contact? I have no idea. I can only try and read the patterns. But more so than at any other time in my life, it looks like it's a possibility, and I don't want to walk into that new world without having shared my experience. Once the truth is revealed, it will be politicized. You know how it goes. One side will say that the aliens are wholly benevolent and that we have nothing to fear. The other will probably claim that they are in fact demons and that the end times are upon us. But more than the socio-political divide, there will be the experiences. People, either emboldened to share their authentic experience now that the topic has been destigmatized, or merely people running for the footstep of the bandwagon, will come out with their own tales. I do not want to be one of them because, invariably, their stories will also be politicised, and their own recollections of them coloured by the socio-political atmosphere. I want to tell it as clearly and plainly as I remember it, so here it is. The Owl. I was 5. Yes, that's quite young, but my memory from this time in my life is good, and many of the details have been corroborated by my mum and my grandparents when they were alive. My family is first generation American, originally from Ireland. I remember nothing of Ireland as I was an infant when we relocated, but my grandmother told me the stories, the old myths, the history, the funny jokes, so much of it. And culturally, our household was very Irish. This will become relevant later on. We were not poor. I grew up in a large house in the Appalachian Mountains. My grandparents said that the house had originally been built in the late 1700s. It had a large estate of land, primarily used for farming, and our property comprised of the whole of the mountain that it sat upon. The top of the mountain was bald and cleared for farmland, but the sides and valleys all around were deep forest and thickets of rhododendron. I remember the winding road and driveway up the mountain with its switchbacks that never ceased to unnerve me. I remember my grandmother's garden, and I remember the cherry trees and the first time I bit into one of the fruits, only to find that they contained pits, unlike the ones from the store. I'm only telling you all of this because I remember it so vividly, the same way I remember the owl. It sat outside of my window in the large old oak on that side of the house. My room was on the same side of the house as the main bathroom where I took my baths. My mum was young and still learning the whole motherhood thing, and would leave me in the bath until the water had lost its heat while she listened to her records in her room. The owl sat in a low branch making a soft "hoo" sound and watching me through the window. I hated it when the curtains were parted and would scream and cry for them to be closed. I would also scream when the owl watched me until my voice carried over the sounds of the band and my mum came running down to check on me. She looked guilty when she realised how much time had passed, that the water had gone cool, but cold water isn't what bothered me. I would be hysterical, screaming and crying, saying that I didn't want to go away and that I wanted the owl to leave instead. It watched me through the window while I bathed, and when I slept it watched me through the second-story window. The owl scared me. It wasn't right. My mum couldn't make sense of this and would comfort me, but laughed softly, saying, "It's just a bird." She'd concede that owls could look creepy though, and it was certainly creepy. It was a large owl, bigger than our chickens, maybe as big as a small child, and it had these big black eyes that took up so much of its face. Its feathers were a mix of pale and dark grey. I never saw it fly, it was just there, on the low branches or higher up. I did see it walk though, but its legs were all wrong. They were long, longer than they should have been, and it would raise up to walk as though it were raising from a crouch. The branches were close to my bedroom window, too close for my comfort, and it would sit there, watching me. I would get images and words in my mind like intrusive thoughts, but they were not my own. I'd close my eyes tight and pull the covers over my head and hum to myself one of the tunes my grandmother sang to me. Eventually it would either go away or I would fall asleep, but not always. Sometimes time would just pass. It would go from 11 at night to 2 in the morning. I could read the old 80s era clock in my room. I wasn't great at telling the time, but I knew enough to know how much time had passed. It would be like blinking, but in the time of that blink, I had lost hours. I'm sure that you, like me, see the signs for what they are, but at the time, of course, I couldn't understand it. So I told my grandmother. She understood everything. She was wise and she seemed infallible to me as a child. So I told her about the owl and my missing time, and in turn she told me about the fair. It wasn't the first time, as I'd heard many stories before, but she recontextualized them in a way that made sense. She told me about the fae, that they were shapeshifters, and they would take on the form of animals, often with an unsettling characteristic. She told me about how they could mess with your mind and about their telepathy and frightening mental intrusions. She told me the stories of fairy abductions, taking people away and stealing their memories of the events, and she told me of the changelings and of the fae's delight in taking children. It made too much sense. My owl was a fairy, and my fairy wasn't nice. So, per my grandmother's instructions, I slept with iron horseshoes on my bedposts. My mum thought it was silly, but no one directly questions my grandmother. I spoke back to the owl and denied it entrance, denied it any power. I said it 3 times for best effect, and eventually the visitations stopped. I'm not saying that these old superstitious practices worked, although there may be something to them, but Perhaps maybe my force of will helped, or maybe the owl just lost interest. This early experience, along with a lifetime of research into not only aliens but mythology, spirituality, and other fringe subjects, has gradually revealed some potential truths to me. They aren't extraterrestrial. They are from here, but also not here. Another dimension, perhaps, like the Fae are said to be from. Another fold of reality that our ancestors called under the hill. Maybe some even truly do live underground. I don't know. I only have theories, not answers. Perhaps I do have some answers locked away, but I don't want to remember them, and I haven't tried. When I look at the face of certain owls or certain alien images, I feel sick. Not all, mind you, but some give me this primal repulsion and almost prey-like fear response. So if the truth eventually does come out, if disclosure or contact happens, remember that we still don't know a solid thing about them. And remember the messages that our ancestors have been telling us for thousands of years. Beware the small, shape-shifting, child-stealing entities that come out at night and take you away. Thank you for listening, my lovely horrorlings. I hope that you enjoyed tonight's stories and that they won't cause you too much trouble getting off to sleep. Remember to subscribe and hit the notification bell to find out first about more videos just like this one. Sweet dreams!